Hey everyone, I'm Ultima456, you're the Ultimates, and welcome to episode 133 of Let's Platinum Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. Mukuro guessed that the Mastermind programmed their movements in advance, so they wouldn't get hit by a single bullet. She ran for the gates, evading waves of bullets and claws every step of the way, programming 30 Monokumas and 2 turrets while also predicting Mukuro's escape route. This would be considered impossible for anyone, but Mukuro knew it was possible for Junko. As Ultimate Despair, she possessed despair-inducing abilities that surpassed the capabilities of any normal human. Her display of power was only fulfilling Mukuro with despair. Despair. The scene playing out in front of Mukuro was brimming with despair. The adorably deadly Monokumas laughed and danced like reapers as bullets whizzed through the air. It was despair to the point of absurdity, and it was all for Mukuro. But in the presence of such despair, Mukuro felt a strange serenity. For me? Junko's doing all this for me? Junko, are you watching me right now? In the end, perhaps Mukuro really was a disappointment. She clenched her fists. Junko, thank you. The sound of gunfire overshadowed her whisper, and Mukuro fell completely silent. As a member of Ultimate Despair, Mukuro's heart was filled with joy. Though she was filled with emotion, her eyes had lost their sparkle. Silence filled the air. Even the gunfire from the turret seemed to stop for a moment. But that was only an illusion to the one controlling Monokuma. Something strong enough to silence the gunfire and avoid being picked up by the sensor spread throughout the school, with Mukuro at the center. I'll make sure I do this right. With that final thought, she closed her mouth and turned off her emotions. As she ran throughout the waves of scorching bullets, the air around her began to grow colder. As this coolness spread into her heart, it began to beat in a mechanical fashion. Several seconds later, Mukuro's body and mind melted together and became one with her surroundings. Her temperature now dominated the battlefield. Despair, bullets, and Monokumas filled the area. Mukuro predicted their movements and jumped into the air without any hesitation. One of the Monokumas jumped at her, but she avoided his attack, kicked his body, and launched herself in midair. Bullets pierced through the space Mukuro was previously occupying, striking the falling Monokuma right through its internal bomb. The impact of the bullet caused it to explode, sending fiery Monokuma parts everywhere. As she rode the blast wave, Mukuro balanced herself in midair. She kicked away 3 Monokumas that leapt after her. She moved so gracefully, she was practically flying. In contrast, the Monokumas threw themselves into the path of oncoming bullets, exploding one after the other. Some of them exploded near the main entrance, but their blasts didn't even leave a scratch. With full control over the entrance hall, Mukuro evaded bullets and confirmed that the bombs inside Monokuma weren't enough to destroy the door. But she refused to stop. Mukuro needed to get information on what she must do to escape the academy. She had no desire to kill Junko. Mukuro wanted to fill Junko with despair by instilling hope into the future of Makoto and the other students. That was Mukuro's ultimate goal: get information. In contrast to her determination, her mouth stayed shut, but this did not mean Mukuro was not currently speaking to Junko. This situation, this battle of death and destruction, was a conversation of sorts for Mukuro. All she knew how to do was fight. She thought she wasn't interested in anything else. She thought she didn't need anything else. All Mukuro needed to be was a sword to fulfill her sister's desire for despair. That purpose alone was the crux of her existence, and she lived her entire life convincing herself that she couldn't do anything else. That's why power was like a language to Mukuro. A battle to the death revealed more about her heart than mere words ever could. Her words were in the wind of savagery that blows across the battlefield, uprooting others who also speak the language of violence. This was true even against her sister. When Junko would berate her sister, Mukuro couldn't talk back. All she could do was cower and apologize profusely. But it's different now. For the first time, Junko was using a language her sister actually recognized. The child of despair who tore the world apart was speaking to her sister with the language of power. Mukuro's heart filled with joy. For that reason, she strengthened her focus on her conversation with Junko, and that emotion began to gradually disappear. On this frigid battlefield, Mukuro continued her heated conversation. Endless rounds of despair fired from the school's turrets, but Mukuro's words intercepted every last violent shot that threatened to shatter her body and mind in half. She quickly realized that the Monokumas hadn't decreased in number at all, no matter how many she kept destroying. Not only that, she noticed that more Monokumas had been joining the fray until there were nearly 50 of them for Mukuro to fight. But Mukuro's resolve wouldn't break so easily. As she continued to wield her power, her heart began to fill with something that was neither hope nor despair. She learned despair from being abandoned by Junko, and she learned hope from her acts of violence. For Mukuro, who had no interest in this world, this small space in front of the gate was a reflection of her life, a representation of her perfect world. This disappointing girl, filled with endless disappointment, who knew of no other way to live, continued her lonely dance. She surrendered herself to the rhythm of despair, which accompanies the music of hope. That was a cool line. Computer room's innermost area, Monokuma room. How much time had passed? The surveillance cameras at the gates were capturing footage of countless Monokumas falling at the hands of a child who fought like a raging demon. The Monokumas bolstered their numbers, and now 100 of them were trying to sink their claws into Mukuro. Most of them were running on autopilot, reacting to her movements based on prior information they had received in advance. But despite standing before hundreds of mechanical adversaries, Mukuro's face showed no fear. She hadn't sustained a single injury, giving her a presence that was nearly divine to behold. Though Sakura Ogami was powerful enough to injure her arm, Mukuro, in her current state, could potentially fight Sakura to a draw now, without relying on firearms. She took complete control of the battlefield, taking in her surroundings as if they were a part of herself. She dodged attacks from the rear as though she had eyes on the back of her head, and stabbed through Monokuma's weak points with her metal bar. No matter where the attacks came from, Mukuro deflected them all as if her skin were covered in eyes. Describing her as ultimate no longer did her justice. Mukuro had transcended the boundaries of humanity, had become a pure killing machine. Mukuro had transcended the boundaries of humanity to become a pure killing machine. Anyway, whatever. But despite that, even though she understood the ludicrous power her sister possessed, Junko was not afraid. She felt not one iota of fear. After all Junko can feel is despair. She even started to admire her sister's attempt to fill her with despair, but that sentiment quickly filled Junko with an orgiastic ecstasy of despair. Junko knew. She knew that Mukuro was neither hope nor despair. She was just a phenomenon. A disappointing girl who no longer understood herself, who only knew how to be violent because it was all she could believe in anymore. Mukuro had become an avatar of destruction beyond that of any military force. She couldn't even be considered a soldier anymore. She was a natural disaster, like a typhoon or a tornado. Or perhaps, like gravity, she was now a fundamental force of the universe that only existed to bring despair to Junko. The mastermind enjoyed watching her sister go all out. If Mukuro destroyed everything and ruined her life, Junko would still be comforted by the despair. She could just go right ahead and overpower her. Junko considered this for a few seconds until a familiar, hopeless habit reared its head. Her habit of getting so bored that it made her sick. The girl who had been grinning as she watched the screen now bore a look of calm stoicism, and she reached for the microphone connected to the Monokuma speakers. Mukuro was no longer human anymore, but Junko knew how to bring her back. It was a simple feeling, really, and with that hopeless feeling for Mukuro in mind, the mastermind said just one word. Mukuro. In front of the main entrance. Mukuro. That voice. It was calling her name. Instead of using Monokuma's voice filter, Junko's natural voice was coming out of a Monokuma unit. That's all it took. With one word, Mukuro Ikusaba stopped being a force of nature and became a person again. Monokuma would not miss this opportunity. As if moving to the beat of Mukuro's shaking heart, a torrent of claws leapt to attack her, but Mukuro trusted her instincts and twisted her entire body to fend off the attacks, leaving her with only a few scrapes here and there. But the despair wasn't over yet. The ultimate despair didn't waste any time making her next move. Mukuro, watch out. Huh? As soon as Mukuro heard that voice, her mind went completely blank. There was no mistaking it. That was Makoto's scream. The scream that saved her from the spears of Gungmyo and changed her destiny. No, that's wrong. It took her a tenth of a second to realize that voice was just a sound clip that Junko had replayed, but it was more than enough time to drag Mukuro, who had regained her humanity, into despair. Right when she recovered from her moment of shock, Monokuma appeared behind her and roundhouse kicked her in the temple. She twisted her head to roll with the blow, but at that moment, a different Monokuma attacked her from the opposite side with a headbutt. And as soon as Mukuro dodged that attack, 3 Monokumas launched simultaneous drop kicks and knocked her to the ground. The fact that they weren't using their claws meant they weren't trying to kill Mukuro right away. Before she could stand up again, dozens of Monokumas waiting for her on the floor climbed on top of Mukuro and pinned her limbs. One of the Monokumas waddled over to Mukuro as she lay face down on the floor and laughed. Pooh! A pretty girl's getting pinned by all these me's. I wonder if I should feel more excited about this. Don't make that face. If I wanted to kill you, I'd just pump you full of bullets right now. But I don't think the audience watching this on TV would like that ending very much. I need to make sure I do it the right way this time. What are you planning to do to me? Mukuro asked in her emotionless voice. Monokuma guffawed and answered, Nothing. I'm just going to stick to the original plan and make you play the killing game at this school. I'll erase everyone's memories again, and I'll just make them redo the introduction and this entrance ceremony again. In typical Monokuma fashion, he leaned his face towards Mukuro. But it'd be boring if we had to redo everything. Maybe this time I'll have you participate as Mukuro Ikusaba. I'll take away even more of your memories like I did to that irritating detective girl. You'll just be a poor little girl with no memory at all. As Monokuma talked and wiggled his body from side to side, the other Monokumas danced and twirled around. Amid this fantastical scene, Monokuma continued to describe his hopeless plan in a nonchalant manner. At first, you'll be the girl with amnesia, and everyone will feel so sorry for you. But as they unravel the mystery of this academy, they'll find out who you really are. It's exciting to think how they'll treat you when that happens. Knowing you, you'll probably kill someone purely on instinct. Maybe I should rethink my rules about self-defense. Pooh! You can't. Her memories would be erased. There was nothing she could do about her classmates hating her. But losing even her childhood memories would mean her connection to Junko would be severed as well. Even if Mukuro had no interest in the world, that was unbearable even for her. I've heard of New Game Plus before, but this is the first time I'll get to see a New Game Minus. Should I tie you up for fun? Or maybe we should make this game even more masochistic. Forget hard mode, very hard mode, and inferno mode. Why not just skip ahead to impossible mode? Maybe I'll erase your memories after I drag you on a motorcycle, pummel you with 1,000 baseballs, burn you at the stake, and crush you with an excavator. Mukuro knew what Monokuma was talking about. He was describing the tools that they had prepared for various executions they had planned for the students. After everyone reintroduces themselves, they'll walk around the school grounds and eventually find a flat-chested girl with amnesia, covered in bandages with Fenrir's tattoo on her right hand. I bet a certain fanbase might get off on that. If this were a game, that would increase sales by 500%. Though Monokuma sounded like he was joking, everything he said was deadly serious. As evidence, Mukuro heard a rumbling sound off in the distance. Now then, your sweet ride is on its way. Based on the engine's noise, Mukuro surmised that it was the large motorcycle that was supposed to be used for one of the executions. I took the time to bring this all the way from the punishment room, so you better be grateful. The sound of the roaring engine grew louder and louder, like the approaching footsteps of death. Mukuro wondered how Monokuma would drive it with such tiny arms and legs, but then she remembered she was dealing with an ultimate despair. Junko would make the impossible possible just to bring about despair. A despair that went hand in hand with Mukuro's fate. Did I fail? I couldn't fill Junko with despair. I couldn't save Makoto and the others. Questions raced through Mukuro's mind, but she wasn't able to answer them. There's no way she could have answered them so easily. After all, she was still alive. The sound of the motorcycle grew closer and closer, as if it was threatening to break Mukuro's spirit. Suddenly, Monokuma stopped moving. The other Monokumas continued doing their automatic movements. As this strange event unfolded, Mukuro noticed something. The motorcycle had suddenly gone quiet. After a few seconds, the engine exploded to life and began to approach even faster than before. Only a few seconds later, what appeared in front of the main entrance was an enormous motorcycle that plowed through groups of Monokumas, like a predator hunting its prey. The rider of this motorcycle was none other than Mondo Owada. Mukuro and Monokuma were both visibly shocked by this turn of events. Instead of addressing them, Mondo accelerated the motorcycle he stole from Monokuma directly toward Mukuro. Just before his front tire touched Mukuro, he popped a reverse wheelie and turned the entire motorcycle around. The back wheel swept over Mukuro's back, knocking away all the Monokumas that were pinning her. "Hey, can you stand?" Mondo asked and begrudgingly offered his hand to Mukuro. Confused, Mukuro took his hand and stood up. "What are you doing, Mondo? I was so close." One of the Monokumas protested, not in his normal voice, but as the hacker Bashiki Madurai. "Oh yeah, you're Bashiki or whatever, right?" "That's right. Why are you helping a terrorist?" "I ain't bragging about this or anything, but I have no clue if you or this girl is lying." The veins in his temple began to bulge, and his cheeks flushed with anger as Mondo said, "But still, I ain't the type to just stand around while some idiot gangs up on a girl." "What are you saying? Get a hold of yourself. You must be experiencing Stockholm syndrome. You've deluded yourself into thinking you're friends with the criminal who's taking you hostage." Monokuma tried to explain to Mondo, but he ignored him, took Mukuro's hand and pulled her onto the back of the motorcycle. Oh, shut the F up. I don't know nothing about Stockholms or drones, but don't go acting like you can boss me around. As Mondo shouted, he revved the motorcycle as if he was using it to punctuate his words. The ceiling-mounted turrets began moving, but the two disappeared before the turrets could take aim at the motorcycle. As they zoomed through the hallway, countless Monokumas chased after them, waving their claws wildly through the air. "Why?" asked Mukuro. "Huh?" shouted Mondo. His voice was even louder than the sound of the engine. "Don't get the wrong idea. I don't trust you at all." He lowered his voice slightly, as if he were whispering to himself. "But still, I don't know why, but I felt like I could trust what he said." "He?" inquired Mukuro. But there was no time for questions. The unit leading the Monokumas chasing after the motorcycle had almost caught up to them. And then, like the enormous maw of some fearsome creature, they brandished their claws in perfect unison. At that moment, the motorcycle zoomed by a certain girl. A girl whose fighting ability surpasses that of any normal human. The strongest girl on Earth. With a fighting spirit that defied comprehension, the ultimate martial artist kicked off the floor. A sound even louder than the motorcycle's engine filled the room. When Mukuro looked back, she saw Sakura landing on the floor, sending the pack of Monokumas flying several meters away. Sakura? If she heard Mukuro mumble her name, Sakura didn't acknowledge it. Like a statue of a fearsome god king, she calmed her breathing as she stood before the pack of Monokumas, ready for battle. Your pursuit methods seem unbecoming for one who claims to be the ultimate hacker. An overpowering aura seeped from her skin, and her skin shimmered as an intense heat began to fill the hallway. Unlike the power of Mukuro's sheer violence, this was the power of martial arts. Mukuro froze the air around her and time along with it, but Sakura was generating enough heat to boil space itself as she stood before the Monokumas. With that heat stinging her back, Mukuro looked ahead. Hifumi and Chihiro were cautiously peeking from behind the door leading to the dorms, while Aoi and Taka kept watch from inside the building. After passing them by, Mondo slowed down the motorcycle as he reached the front of the cafeteria and turned in to a complete stop. The other students looked warily at Mukuro. But among these students, Mukuro noticed two people who weren't regarding her with suspicion. One was Kyoko, who seemed to be studying the situation. The other one was a skinny boy, who was leaning against Kyoko's shoulder. Makoto? Mukuro's lips began to tremble as she sat on the back of the motorcycle. Ignoring the pain coursing through his body, Makoto smiled at Mukuro and repeated what he said to her earlier. I'm glad you're safe, Mukuro." Unfortunately, Mukuro was unable to realize her hope of filling her little sister with despair. Instead, she had successfully planted the seeds of hope into her fellow students. Makoto had barely regained consciousness while Mukuro was fighting the horde of Monokumas at the main entrance. When he woke up, he did something extremely simple. He talked about his memories. Most of the students were still skeptical even after listening to Mukuro's recorded confession on Chihiro's laptop. Obviously, they were still not entirely convinced at first when Makoto woke up, but after Sakura asked him a certain question, the ambience completely changed. Then beyond the walls of this school, the world is completely destroyed. You're saying there's no one else alive? Makoto slowly sat up to answer Sakura's meek question. Don't worry, I'm sure Kenichiro is still safe. I'm sure he'll keep his promise to you. Sakura gasped. Kenichiro was the only man she couldn't defeat, a man who had promised her a rematch, and made her one other promise as well. How do you know that name? How do you know about that promise? Because you told me. No. Makoto slowly corrected himself. You told all of us. Sakura was silent after hearing those words, but she then faced the other students and spoke in a loud, clear voice. I'm going to trust Makoto. Sakura? Though Aoi was shocked, Sakura continued to speak with determination. What Makoto just said is something I kept locked away inside my memories. In fact, I was planning to keep that a secret until the day I died. But if I shared that secret, that means there was once a strong bond between Makoto, myself, and with my fellow students as well. Makoto continued to talk in a gentle tone. Though it couldn't have been good for his health, he continued to slowly talk about the memories that the other students no longer had. Why do you know about the story I'm planning to write? Are you a specialist Nen user who can predict the future? You already finished that story, Hifumi. You had me. You helped you with inking. What? Wait a sec. How do you know I extorted money from that girl related to the Kuzuryu clan? I don't know who says that one. Mondo, maybe? I don't know. Because you even tried to sell my organs to them. His wounds were excruciating. But even so, Makoto kept smiling and talking about their lives together, as if it was his duty to do so now that he had regained his memories. As the other students listened to him, they slowly began to realize something. The vivid accounts he was providing couldn't be explained as just passing knowledge. Clearly, some kind of bond between them all had been erased. Only Byakuya remained cynical. There's no way I would have grown closer to any of you. It's likely that you're all secretly working together. Though Byakuya was still hostile towards Makoto's recollection of their memories, for the time being, he determined that Makoto wasn't actually a terrorist. Mukuro had bought enough time for Makoto to wake up and share his memories with the others, even if she hadn't intended to do that. It was still a small sliver of hope that she grasped tightly. And now, as she looked at the boy who had smiled at her, Mukuro didn't know what to say. She couldn't think of anything to say at all. The battle was over, and Mukuro was now back to being a disappointing girl. She turned away from everyone's faces and apologetically climbed off the back of the motorcycle. But Makoto saw her and slowly opened his mouth to say, "Thank you, Mukuro. You saved my life." Makoto gave her words of sincere gratitude between his weak breaths. Mukuro couldn't bring herself to look at him as she mumbled to herself, "Why? Huh? If Kyoko told you, then you already know what I did, right?" After regaining his memories and learning the truth, Mukuro should have been nothing but a hated traitor to him. Why would he smile at someone like her? Mukuro kept her head down. Makoto smiled as if he was unsure how to respond and said, "Well, I guess you're right. But you also saved my life many times during these past 2 years, and..." Makoto took a deep, quiet breath and smiled at Mukuro again. "You're my friend. We all spent time with each other. It would be great if you could look for a different path, not despair. And if there's any way I can help you, I will. Do you really think I can walk another path at this point? I don't know what you can do, or even what I can do, but I think it's more important to look for that path instead of actually finding it." Was this intentional or a coincidence? Just before he regained his memories, Makoto had said something similar to Mukuro when she spoke to him in the nurse's office as Junko. Regardless of whether he lost his memories or regained them, those words revealed Makoto's true character. As Mukuro confirmed that to herself, Makoto blurted out something that was almost too trusting. "And it's not just you. Even Junko can..." But he was immediately interrupted. "Boo! Boo!" Monokuma's face appeared on every monitor in the academy and his laughter seemed to be coming out of every speaker. I could have kept pretending to be that ultimate hacker, but it's boring to impersonate someone who doesn't even exist. If this keeps up, I'll lose my identity and turn into Konokuma. Kyoko looked up at the surveillance camera and addressed Monokuma directly. "You seem to give up pretty easily." "There isn't a bear anywhere that gives up as easily as I do. Regardless, I'm pretty sure Chihiro has figured out the secret of my control program by now. So just as I thought, you included that program on purpose." Kyoko realized something when Mukuro told her about Junko. There were 2 reasons such a hateful person would intentionally leave an obvious clue inside the Monokuma units. Either Junko wanted the students to learn the truth about the outside world and themselves on their own and turn their hopes into despair, or she was looking forward to that clue resulting in her own plan being undone, which would allow her to feel despair toward herself. She was an angel of everlasting darkness, delighting in her own despair and using it to spread despair and destruction to those around her. Why would someone like that continue to play the role of Monokuma? Alright, let's leave it there. We got to 600 or 601 or whatever it is. So we should be able to finish the next episode. Nice. Okay, for now I want to thank you all for watching episode 133 of Let's Platinum Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair. My name's Ultima456, you're the Ultimates, and I'll see you next time.